Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Liberty Talk FM.
Welcome to Living the Solution with Dr. Elena George. Today I have one of my favorite guests because I had a great time last time we were on the air, and I learned a great deal about my rights as an American citizen. I think everybody they need to do their research, and you need to know what your rights are. Otherwise, if you don't know, they're going to be taken away from you. Last time that Ms. Martin was on with us, we talked about COVID and how it was taking away civil liberties, but now we're in a different position. The election's coming. We have a Supreme Court spot that's open. There is a lot of information that's rolling out about how bad this mail-in voting situation is. And I wanted an expert to come back on to speak about the Constitution. We're speaking with Ms. Joanna Martin. She is a lawyer, a philosopher, a logician. She's a strict constructionist of the U.S. Constitution. And this is somebody who knows the Constitution in and out and has been fighting for our rights in various states. And I would love to catch up with you and find out what's going on with all the fights that you're involved with. I think there's Pennsylvania and other states, but right now we want to really, really drill down and educate people about what's going on with our rights as American citizens and, quite frankly, as human beings. Not now with the COVID, but now with the election, because I think this is one of the most consequential elections that we've ever had. And before the break, or before we started, I think for me, it's about good versus evil. That's really what it's coming down to. So, Ms. Martin, I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my honor. Thank you.
Well, what's your take on, let's start off with the elections. I mean, we have right now, next week, we're going to have the Supreme Court nomination start the process in the Senate. Do you think we should? Well, I guess there's an argument on both sides trying to be made that we shouldn't move forward with the Supreme Court nomination process because we're in an election year, and they're using all sorts of nonsense.
Yeah, but the Senate needs to hold hearings immediately, and they need to confirm her. She is not my first choice, but she's better than what we had before. And this whole rigmarole about the upcoming election could end up in the Supreme Court, and we don't want a tie vote. We want a 5-4 vote at least, 5 in our favor. So they have got to hold hearings.
Well, I want to ask a question.
And it is completely proper for them to do so.
Okay, so it's not the president going outside the bounds of his authority to do this.
Oh, no, he has total authority. Article 2 is clear. The president nominates judicial judges, federal judges, and the Senate is to confirm or reject. So the Senate needs to confirm her, and we have to move forward. We're in desperate trouble about this election.
I agree.
I see a major catastrophe coming with respect to the election.
Well, let's back up because I have a question. If it doesn't happen, God forbid, what happens if it's a 4-4 decision? I mean, there's no definitive decision that can be made. What do we do? Is that a constitutional crisis?
Well, the left intends to steal the election. They get away with stealing elections because Americans don't know what our Constitution says about elections, and the federal government routinely violates the election provisions in the Constitution. What I'd like to do is I've got 4 major points about the Constitution and elections. I should go over those.
Please.
I think that would help your listeners.
Definitely.
If they know what the Constitution says about the election, then they'll understand better what the judges on the Supreme Court need to do. So let's look at what our Constitution says about elections. The first issue, and this is really very important, is who determines the qualifications for voting. Under the Articles of Confederation, which was our first constitution, the original states elected representatives to the Continental Congress. These states had their own state constitution, which set the qualifications for voting. So when our national constitution of 1787 was drafted, that's the constitution we have now, the states retained their pre-existing power to set the qualifications for voting. They did this at Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution. So from the beginning, the state set the qualifications people must meet before they can vote. The state constitutions restricted voting to citizens. State constitutions also commonly opposed additional requirements for voting, such as property ownership. But in 1993, Congress passed the National Voter Registration Act, which provides a national form for voter registration. This act purports to require the states to register anyone who fills out the federal form. It also purports to require states to permit voter registration at welfare offices and driver's licenses office. In several states, illegal aliens can get driver's licenses. In California, these illegals are automatically registered to vote when they got their driver's licenses. Now let's look at what happened in Arizona, and that's what has happened all over the country. Arizona was overrun with illegal aliens who were voting. So the people of Arizona passed a proposition which required applicants for voter registration to provide proof of U.S. citizenship. But the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the people of Arizona could not require applicants for voter registration to provide proof of citizenship because the National Voter Registration Act doesn't require applicants to prove that they're U.S. citizens. And the Supreme Court affirmed the Ninth Circuit. So with the National Voter Registration Act, Congress usurped the retained power of the states to set voter qualifications, and by affirming the lawless decision of the Ninth Circuit, the Supreme Court also violated Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1 of our Constitution. I've written 3 papers on this. They are on my website under the category National Voter Registration Act. So it was Congress and the U.S. Supreme Court which mandated that anyone should be allowed to vote, and they are prohibiting the states from enforcing the citizenship requirement.
Wow, that's really disturbing.
Yes, it has been a disaster.
Is there any means of reversing this unconstitutional judgment?
Well, of course, the court could reverse it themselves, but they're unlikely to do so. But there is a remedy. The states can nullify it. The states can refuse to submit to it. And that is what I advised in my 3rd paper on this. The act is unconstitutional. The states can simply refuse to comply with it, and they can demand that all applicants for voter registration produce proof of citizenship, and they can require all existing persons who are already registered to vote to come in and produce proof of citizenship. And so what are the federal courts going to do? They don't have an army. They cannot enforce their own order. They have to rely on the executive branch of the federal government to enforce it. So the question is, who believes that President Trump is going to send in the National Guard to force states to allow illegal aliens to vote? So it's just a matter of the states manning up and obeying the Constitution and not the federal courts.
Well, let's think about that, and let's take our first break, because this is a lot to get your mind around. Let's take our break. You're living in the solution. Welcome back to Living the Solution. We're speaking with Miss Joanna Martin, and she's a veteran member of the U.S. Army, legal, I guess you're a JAG, correct?
Yes, JAG.
And
Judge Advocate General.
Gotcha. And somebody who is doing yeoman's work in protecting our rights. This is a major thing. As an American citizen, everybody should be, I don't care what color you are, everybody should be up in arms that people who are not citizens are able to vote in our elections. It lowers or it diffuses our power as American citizens. Why do you have a country if you don't have rights that separate you from someone who's a guest in your country? It makes no sense. And now that's exactly. Now that's the first point. Please continue with the other three points that you wanted to mention.
Okay, the second point. What does our Constitution say about how the president and vice president are to be elected? What we're doing today has nothing to do with what the Constitution requires. Electors appointed by the states are supposed to be the ones who choose the president. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution provides that each state legislature is to decide how the electors for their state will be appointed. These electors were supposed to be the ones who actually made the decision as to who would be president and vice president. Our framers never intended for the president to be elected by popular vote. They knew that all history demonstrates that people lack the knowledge, wisdom, and judgment to make wise choices when voting for politicians. So our framers expected the electors to be selected from the most enlightened and respectable citizens who would not be taken in by demagogues, and these electors would be the ones who actually made the decision as to who would be president and vice president. Pursuant to Article 2, Section 1, Clause 4, Congress has the power to determine the time of choosing the electors and the day on which they vote. And the day is to be the same throughout the United States. Now, it's now set for November the 3rd. Congress could change that date, but the House won't permit it. The 12th Amendment establishes the procedures for voting by electors. It requires the electors in each state are to meet and cast their votes for president and then vote separately for vice president. Say a state has 13 electoral votes. They would have 13 electors, and the voting goes like this. For president, Mr. Jones gets 6 votes, Mr. Smith gets 5 votes, and Mr. Brown gets 2 votes. Then they have a separate ballot for vice president. Mr. Cross gets 8 votes, and Mr. Duncan gets 5 votes. The electors sign and certify this list and send it to the President of the Senate. On the appointed day, the President of the Senate counts the electors' votes. The person with the greatest number of votes for president becomes president if he has a majority. The person with the greatest number of votes for vice president becomes the vice president if he has a majority. Then the 12th Amendment goes on to discuss various contingencies, such as what if no one has a majority? But the political parties took over the entire process, changed it completely, and our system today bears no resemblance to the 12th Amendment. And instead of the electors selecting president and vice president, the political parties select candidates for those offices. Now, the scuttlebutt is that George Soros is the one who selected Kamala Harris for vice president. We all know that if Joe Biden is elected, he won't be in office for long, and Harris will be the new president. So the man with the money gets to choose our president instead of the electors from the states. And to its shame, the U.S. Supreme Court recently ruled that presidential electors may not use their own judgment when voting for president. They must comply with the popular vote in their state. So, if the elections are stolen in the states, as everything suggests the left is attempting to do, the electors cannot do a thing about it. They still have to go with the popular vote. The U.S. Supreme Court has so ruled.
Wow.
A disaster.
Wow. I mean, it's rigged. I mean, there's no other way to think about it. And whoever has the money has the power. Isn't that always the way? At least recently. It's oligarch driven.
Yes.
And this is a person who's not even a citizen, technically, running our elections. How is that even possible?
If it's true that her parents were not U.S. citizens at the time she is born, she is not eligible to be a vice president or president. But we live in a time where the law is rapidly disappearing and everybody ignores the Constitution. The U.S. Supreme Court ignores it. Congress ignores it. And we now elect ineligible people to the highest office in the land. And the left doesn't care.
Well, it's about power. It's not about what's right. And can you please just drill down to what a naturalized citizen is? Because I think people are a little uncertain about what that really means.
Okay. A natural-born citizen, if two U.S. citizen parents have a baby, their baby takes the same status as his parents. They are both citizens, so the baby is born a U.S. citizen. It is a natural-born citizen. Now let's look at Marco Rubio, who is not a natural-born citizen. He is a naturalized citizen. Marco Rubio was born in the United States. His parents were not U.S. citizens, but they were lawful residents of the United States. They were lawfully here. So they were subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Section 1 of the 14th Amendment extends citizenship to anyone who is born here who is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So since Marco's parents were lawfully here, they were subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So when he was born, he became a naturalized citizen under Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. Now, he is forever disqualified to be president because he's not a natural-born citizen, but he is a naturalized citizen.
Now, if his parents had both become American citizens and, not green card, but actually citizens, would that change? Would that have changed his designation before he was born?
If they had obtained U.S. citizenship by the time he was born, then he would have been a U.S. citizen. For example, the original intent of Section 1 of the 14th Amendment was to extend citizenship to the freed slaves. Now, that first generation of freed slaves, they were not natural-born citizens, even though they had been born here and their parents had been born here for several generations back. But that first generation of slaves, they were all naturalized citizens. However, as soon as they became naturalized citizens, the children born to them were natural-born citizens because their parents were citizens at the time their babies were born.
Gotcha.
And our first generations of presidents, they were not natural-born citizens. When they were born, they were England, our sovereign was the King of England. So everybody born in America was born a subject to the King of England. So our first presidents were all born as subjects to the King of England. but with the Declaration of Independence, they became converted to U.S. citizens.
Now, for those people who, I'm sure there are people on the other side of, as long as you're in America, you're an American, but there is actually something to having one allegiance, isn't there? You shouldn't be able to be a subject of some other country. I mean, where's your allegiance lie? And that's about having a country, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, and that was the reason that John Jay, who later became our first Chief Justice, wrote General Washington during the time the Federal Convention of 1787 was going on, where our present Constitution was being written. John Jay said we must provide that the president is a natural-born citizen.
Well,
after that first generation of president.
Sure. I mean, that makes perfect sense. Now, we're kind of coming close to the break, but I want to start the conversation about Congress. I've read, and correct me if I'm wrong, that initially lawyers were not supposed to be in Congress. Is that in the Constitution?
No, that's not true.
Okay.
James Madison was a lawyer. Thomas Jefferson was a lawyer. Oh, yeah, in fact, many of those guys were lawyers, and they did serve in Congress.
Okay. And with the bar exam, I mean, is there some allegiance to the crown because of being part of that?
No, that is a patriot myth.
Okay.
I've heard that it's something about aristocracy and, that something about how lawyers are supposed to be aristocrats, and I assure you, I've been a lawyer for 50 years, and I am not an aristocrat. We abolished that in our Constitution.
Fair enough. I wanted to make sure we got that clear,
Oh, yeah.
So now that we've got the conspiracy side out, let's take our second break, and then I like to pick up with the third and fourth arguments that you want us to know about. So let's take our second break. You're living in the solution. Welcome back to Living in the Solution. We're speaking with Miss Joanna Martin. She has a website, publiushuldah.com, publius-huldah.com. I hope that's correct.
Yes.
And it's about everything. All her blogs are here, categories, all the different amendments. I think it's a primer. And if you feel overwhelmed, this is a really good place to start, because you can start reading specific things so that you can get your mind around your rights. Because if you don't know what they are, as I said at the beginning of the show, they will be taken from you. So if you can pick up where you left off on your third point now.
Okay. And this is extremely important, and it has to do with how the left is stealing the upcoming election. What does our Constitution say about elections to Congress, the House and the Senate? Now, these elections are governed by Article 1, Section 4. And with the 17th Amendment, elections to the Senate are now also covered by Article 1, Section 4. Article 1, Section 4 provides that the times, places, and manner of conducting elections to Congress are set by the state legislatures, but Congress has the power to overrule the laws the state legislatures make. So the power to determine the times, places, and manner of federal elections to Congress is granted to the legislative branches of the state and federal governments. State legislatures have the power to prohibit or allow mail-in voting, and Congress has the power to overrule the state legislatures. State legislatures have the power to set a specific date for voting or set up a long election season, as we have now. And Congress has the power to overrule the state legislatures. And here's the key. The judicial branches of the state and federal government have no lawful authority over this issue, but they have been usurping power and are substituting their opinions for the acts of the state legislatures. lawless judges are saying, and this is going on right now, that because of COVID-19, voters shouldn't be required to go to the polls. Everyone should be allowed to vote by mail. In my state, Tennessee, last month, a federal judge ruled that a Tennessee law which provides that persons who registered to vote by mail must vote in person and bring ID the first time they vote is unconstitutional. So, thanks to this judge, mail-in voter registration permits dead people to be registered to vote, and with mail-in voting, these dead people can vote forever. That's what the left wants, and that's what this federal judge just permitted for Tennessee. It is insane to submit to such lawless dictates of judges. But so far, our election officials are submitting.
What?
Now, state legislatures once established common sense rules for conducting federal elections, but they got intimidated into abandoning these common sense rules. This abandonment of common sense procedures is what enabled the Marxists to steal the elections. Remember the 2008 Minnesota U.S. Senate race where Republican Norm Coleman won on Election Day, but for weeks thereafter, ballots kept pouring in, and all of them were for Al Franken.
I remember.
Well, obviously, the election was stolen for Frankel, but the Republicans caved in. There is only one way to have honest elections, and this is how to do it. One, the National Voter Registration Act is monstrously unconstitutional. States must refuse to submit to it. James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton were clear that when Congress passes a law which is unconstitutional, the states have the power and duty to refuse to submit. They were also clear that the states, as the parties to the Constitutional Compact which created the federal government, are the final judge as to whether decisions of the Supreme Court violate the Constitution. They never said that the Supreme Court is the final authority on the meaning of our Constitution, but that is the lie that American lawyers have been told for the last 100 years. So the first thing state legislatures must do is man up and reclaim their retained power to determine the qualifications for voting in their state and enforce those qualifications. They should require all applicants for voter registration to register in person. That's the only way you know that a dead person isn't being registered. At the election registrar's office and bring proof of identity and U.S. citizenship. They should do the same for the people who are already registered. And they should unregister those who aren't qualified. This is the only way to prevent dead people and illegal aliens from being registered to vote. The second thing state legislatures must do is to reinstitute common sense procedures to protect the sanctity of the vote. Everybody who wants to vote must physically appear at their official designated place of voting and produce proof of identity. This is the only way to prevent dead people from voting. Election day must be for one day, not weeks and months before and after the election. Absentee voting must be restricted to those who are out of the country or out of state due to military service, service in the diplomatic corps, missionaries stationed overseas, businessmen stationed overseas, and so forth. We used to do it this way, but the Marxists came in with their hard luck stories about how these requirements were harsh and unfair and discriminatory, and so everybody gave in to their demands. So now, mail-in ballots seem to be printed by the millions and sent out indiscriminately, picked up in massive numbers, and filled out by political operatives. With ballot harvesting, political operatives collect filled-out ballots and sift through them and toss the ballots which are for Trump. With extended periods for counting the voting, the Marxists can keep churning out the Biden ballots until they have enough to win. So judges are usurping power to make last-minute changes to state election laws, changes which permit cheating on a massive scale, but everybody seems to be going along with it because they wrongly believe that judges are gods who must be obeyed.
I think we can tell from some of the, judges who are on a mission to make sure that their side wins, that it's not impartial. I mean, I'm looking now at the Flynn case and Sullivan, the judge, and that's an example of someone being railroaded based on ideology. Law be damned, pretty much. And if they can do that to him, what are they going to do to us who don't have that kind of money, who can't hire an amazing lawyer? What do we do?
I know it is a classic example of how the law is disappearing from our country. I have never heard of a judge who's presiding on the case becoming also the prosecutor. Mm-hmm. It is a disgrace. I started out as a criminal defense lawyer. There are strictly separate roles: the prosecutor, the defense, the judge, and the jury. And nobody is supposed to meddle in other people's area. Mm-hmm. There is a remedy for this. Impeachment. Congress has the power to impeach Sullivan and remove him from the bench. But here's the problem. The House is controlled by Democrats. They don't care what this judge is doing to General Flynn. They don't care. So they're not going to impeach this judge.
Wow. I mean, there seems to be a difference between the law and justice. They're not the same anymore.
No, they're not. Well, the House isn't acting according to the law. It's just raw power. We hate General Flynn. We want him destroyed. That's their attitude.
Well, I mean, just the talk of maybe second time impeaching the president because he picked a Supreme Court justice, which is part of his duties. I mean, the thought of that, I think, thank God it died. But I did hear about that. I think they talked about it at least, which is completely ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, and even worse. Now Nancy Pelosi says she wants to invoke the 25th Amendment and I do believe that she's under demonic possession.
It's certainly not of God, that's for sure, because there's no justice. There's nothing that's positive. I mean, one side they're wishing him well, the other side is wishing that he died. This is not even. It's not human. It's not American. I can't believe people are saying this with impunity and that nothing happens to them. Let's take our last break and come back. You're living in the solution. Welcome back to Living in Solution. We're speaking with Miss Joanna Martin, and I think everybody's getting a really good primer on how far off the rails our justice system has gone. I have a question about things like these attorney generals in various states who are letting people out with no bail and absolute crimes being committed and people just being as a revolving door. What is there a remedy for this? I mean, can't the attorney general stop this? I mean, he's supposed to be the head of all of the laws in the country, right?
Well, you mean the U.S. Attorney General?
Correct. Does he have any power to stop this?
Well, the U.S. Attorney General wouldn't have any power over the state prisoners. People who are in prison because they've been convicted of state crimes. But he does have some power over federal prisoners. Mm-hmm. What's happening is, I saw a movie once. The setting was Berlin, Germany, just after World War II. There was the characters were an American woman and a young German man who had graduated from law school. And the woman asked the German man, you graduated from law school. Why didn't you ever practice law? And he said, because the law disappeared in my country. He was talking about the beginning, when the Nazis took over. Mm-hmm. The law disappeared. That's what's happening here. The law is disappearing.
Well, if the law disappears, then we're in trouble. Because if you can't, you don't have property rights, you don't have rights to protect yourself. These people in, St. Louis, who are protecting their own property, and now they're indicted. Yes. I mean, they could have been completely killed, and that would have been okay. I mean, it doesn't matter what color you are. If you don't have the right to protect your person and your property, then none of us are safe. And if people, right. I find that it's like being, it's like a mob mentality. Vote our way and we'll make it stop. That's what they basically said. We'll make it go away when you vote for the Democrats. People don't, I'm totally I'm speechless that they were able to say that and get away with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very disappointed in the way the federal government, Trump has the power to send in the National Guard to these cities to stop the riots and the insurrections. It's clear. I'd have a paper on this. But apparently, Trump hasn't sent in the National Guard because the Secretary of Defense said the military won't support you.
But he heads the military. So how can he say, isn't that sedition or whatever? Well, saying something like that?
Yeah. Well, what happened is during the Obama administration, Obama filled the military with his hirelings. And he got rid of the brass who wouldn't go along with the program. So the military, the senior military is still full of Obama appointees. And I think that Trump's Achilles heel may be that he didn't understand that the first thing he needed to do was to relieve from their command all of the military brass who had been promoted by Obama. Do you remember when Obama took office the first time? The first thing he did was to fire all 93 U.S. attorneys.
Yes.
Or was that Clinton?
No, that was Obama.
Both of them.
Well, I think they both did, actually. But I remember removing a lot of military brass.
Yeah. And they put their own people in. Mm-hmm. Huh? Didn't purge the military of the Obama appointees. He should have relieved them all of command and gotten his own people in there.
Is there a way to fix this? I mean, I think the people have ultimate power because we decide who gets up in there, and we have to make our voices heard. I think one thing that does happen is that when people start standing up and saying, I'm not going to do something, like the people in New York now, I think it was the Hasidic population that they burn their masks, and I think they're not going along with the program. Maybe I hope that's a wake-up call for the rest of the folks in New York that are having their rights summarily removed daily and across the country. They can't stop us if we decide we're going to withdraw our consent. Is that a way that we can think about it?
Well, I do see it now as a civic duty for American citizens to refuse to comply with clearly unconstitutional dictates from any branch of the federal or state governments.
Oh, if we don't,
I don't comply.
Well, I mean, think about it. You're going to be stuck in your house, without a job, getting sustainable income, and hoping for the best, in a darker house, because of global warming. I mean, it's not something that bodes well for our safety and our health as human beings. And I'm curious, what's the end point of all this lawlessness? What are they trying to, I know power is one, but what role does the UN play with this? I'm just curious, because it seems that they're always have their finger in the direction that our country's supposed to be going, whether that's disarming people, whether that's, taking away our ability to be Americans.
I see three major dark forces which are trying to take over our country, and I don't know what the relationship is between these three dark forces. It may be that they're working together, or it may be that they're in competition with each other. There are the communists, the Marxists, the communists. The Marxists have taken over the Democrat Party. That's one dark force. The second dark force is the Islamists. They are committed to Islamist supremacy in this country. They want to get rid of our Constitution and replace it with Sharia. And by the way, the communists want to get rid of our Constitution and replace it with their Constitution, which is probably the proposed Constitution for the new Socialist Republic in North America. Then the third faction, which is striving to take over our country, is the globalist. That's what the USMCA trade agreement is about. That's what the North American Union is about. And that's where we will all be put under the subjugation of the United Nations. So these three forces, they may be fighting each other. They may be cooperating with each other to get us. I just don't know.
Well, they all have one commonality, and that's, I think, disdain for the American people. That rhetoric is pretty clear to me. And
yes,
it's, don't you find?
And tyranny.
Yeah, and divide and conquer and control and power. And I think, COVID has been used as a bat to try to put us into submission. So we'll just say, okay, we'll give up. And we can't do that.
Right.
If you can go to the supermarket and you can riot, then you can vote. Use your common sense, folks.
Right. Right. And these federal judges are saying, oh, well, people shouldn't be required to go to the polls to vote. They might get COVID-19. So mail out ballots and let people who registered by mail vote by mail.
Well, they have same day registration in some states, aren't there? So how do you really know who's voting on their registering the same day? I mean, they have every scam known to man going at the same time, it looks like.
They do. And to their eternal shame and disgrace, the Republicans just go along with it. If anybody who opposes the left is called names, and people don't want to be called names, so they just go along with it.
I mean, seriously, has anybody been a child, sticks and stones, anybody? This is your livelihood. This is your life. And my gut tells me that if these folks ever get in, they will fix it so that there will never be another second party. They'll come after their perceived enemies, whether that means you can't have a job, you can't go to school, whatever they can do to lock you out. That's my take on this. That's what it seems like. If you listen to the rhetoric of these Antifa and Black Lives Matter, you owe us. You should move out of your house and give it to us. I mean, it's just like unbelievable stuff.
They're Marxist communists, they're totalitarians, and they're vicious. And, when the communists took over Russia, millions and millions of Russians died, murdered by the communists.
It seems to be one of the baselines, right? I mean, we're seeing that in Venezuela. You saw it in China. I don't know how people ignore history.
Germany.
Yeah, of course. How do people, well, if you remove history by making it racist so no one reads about it, you create different narratives about history, then you don't have a population that's lived it that can know about it. I think that's also something that's driving this, don't you?
Oh, yeah. One of the first things tyrants do is to eradicate the culture which existed before the revolution.
Well, if you don't know, you can't know what the mistake is so you can avoid it. And it's the same playbook. It's like it repeats itself. If you have any knowledge, you know exactly what's potentially going to happen. But we have the power to stop it, don't we?
I hope so. I hope so. I'm not sure. There is 3 days ago there was a bright light about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court should declare. I mean, they have the power to declare that state and federal judges have no power to alter election laws made by state legislatures, and they might do this. I hope it won't be too late. 3 days ago, they gave a favorable ruling in a case. South Carolina law requires a witness to sign an absentee ballot, but a federal judge disagreed with the witness requirement because of COVID-19. So the state appealed to the Supreme Court for an order staying enforcement of the federal judge's order. And the Supreme Court did grant the state's application for a stay. So, they partially granted it. So, the Supreme Court is staying the order staying the judge's order, which said that absentee ballots don't require witnesses. And Justice Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh were the ones who voted on the right side on this issue. So that's 4-4.
Roberts voted against it?
Pardon?
Roberts voted against it?
Roberts is a disaster.
That's a whole nother show.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
God. Roberts is a disaster. But Thomas and Alito, they are my two favorites. Gorsuch, he may be all right. We'll see.
Well,
and Kavanaugh, well, he may be all right. We'll see.
Well, hopefully,
I don't know those two as well as I do Thomas and Alito.
Well, Judge Barrett hopefully will be in the same constitution as the baseline for what she does, I hope.
I hope so. She is the candidate of the Federalist Society. They've been promoting her for years and years and years, and the Federalist Society is supported, among other people, by the globalist Koch brothers. So I'm not thrilled about her, but she's better than what we had before with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So,
well, I think we're in a much better position than we were in the past. And again, it doesn't matter who you are, what you are. We should all want the Constitution to be intact because it protects everybody. It doesn't matter.
Right.
And we need to all be on the same page. If you win, at some point you're going to be on the losing end, and you don't want to be in a position where all of your rights are taken away because you lost an election. So we have to end the show, unfortunately, but I want to thank you so much for coming on because you were an amazing amount of information. And again, how can people reach you and read your blogs? PubliusHulda.com. Well, Miss Martin.
I've got 150 articles posted, and I do answer questions about the Constitution.
Well, everybody needs to take you up on it. Everybody, knowledge is power, right? And we have a very short amount of time before our lives may change. And I want it to be for the better. So thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to have you back on. Maybe we should do a show after the election. Hopefully we will both be happy. On that note, thank you everybody for living in the solution.
Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.